Hi everyone. Today I would like to share with all of you not just part of my story about how I learned Git. I would like to give you some insights about why for me Git is a catalyst in my culture, in my context, in my life. I'm Carlo Gilmar. I was born and raised in Mexico City. I studied informatics engineering. I studied sociology as well. I got my first job as a software developer in a Mexican company named Making Devs. Also, I'm a part of the GitHub Campus Expert Program. I'm the founder of Visual Partnership, which is a creative studio to create illustrations to represent how technology is working using visual thinking. And nowadays, I'm part of the Americas team of the Erlang solutions, working with technologies such as Elixir and Erlang. All of these drawings were made by me. I really hard work on this presentation to make it clear. And so let's start with the beginning. How to start my career as a software developer was one of the questions that I used to make to myself when I was at the university, because I have less context about how this industry is working in the real life. And I was really scared about this because when I got my first job, my first opportunity as a software developer, I have to deal with my first application. And this is a realistic representation of me trying to understand this first application, because the first lesson that I learned is that technology is really complex. It's really complex because you have to deal with many things. You have to deal with a repository, with the application, with the programming language. You have to deal with a context around how your team is building these applications. And for me, I was really scared about that situation. My first assumption was that I can make many copies of my first project to start to break it down and start to understand what was happening inside this repository. One day, my mentor decided to pair with me. We wrote some lines of code, and after that, he realized that we were on one of my many copies of that repository, and he asked me why I have so many copies of that project. And I explained my feelings and my sensations about that I was afraid to break the project. And he told me, okay, that's no problem, because we have a gold tool for this. We have Git. So let me introduce you to Git. In the pragmatic programmer, Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas use the term software entropy to explain how software increases its complexity in many ways. Software is really complex, and make many copies of that project was my way in that moment of my life as a young developer to start to understand this complexity. And my sensation about that was this moment in my life that I was really scared about to understand many things around this. Understand that the software is really, really complex. And in that moment, after realize what things you can do with using Git, simple things like discard changes on your master branch and go back to the latest stated version, that means a lot for me, because that means that you can experiment with your own code, that you can start to build this safe place in your project, that you can make mistakes, and it doesn't matter because you can go back in the time. And that for me was really incredible, was awesome, was my first introduction to software development. It doesn't matter if you are not the best developer, because you can make mistakes. You can experiment with this, and Git showed me this. This was the first lesson that I learned about how software industry is. For me, Git was one of my primary tools. Git converts in one of the, like a learning compass to me in that moment. And Git gives me a way to understand what is software, because I was able, just using simple commands as git show or a git blame, to start to understand just a tiny part of the application. That short wins were really important to me, because that was the way that I start to build my own confidence as a developer, my own autonomy as a developer. This allows me to understand me as a part of the team, as a part of the whole team, not just the people, I mean the project, the client, my colleagues, my technologies. Gives me these first steps to be able to understand me in this context. Learning Git to build software was the big lesson behind this. And probably I was feeling that this could be enough to face this software complexity. But nobody told me that Git is really complex to learn in the first time because as a Mexican, my first assumption is start to look for resources in Spanish. So there are less content in Spanish, and the content in English is really complex. I remember my first experience reading a blog post. It was a tutorial, and I don't know why, but they wanted to show how a commit is working, but also how to make branching and merge strategies, and that was really complex to me. I remember this part of the pragmatic programmer when they say, every maker starts the journey with a basic set of quality tools. What important is invest time in your tools. So for me, I understood that I wanted to invest time understanding just how Git works in local, just this. So this was my first drawing to try to understand to me how Git is working. I made this many years ago. I tried to explain how the basic commands work in my mind. This was the way that I found to understand to me all of this complexity. And after that, I realized that I love this way because this allowed me to build my own learning narratives behind how technology is working. And also, this allowed me to share this to my colleagues, to my friends, to my other colleagues in the university. Thanks to these illustrations, I could become a campus expert. And after that, I realized the power behind Git because Git converts on one tool for tracking my own learning process. And let me explain this point. I remember that I have an experience learning my first JavaScript framework, which was Ember.js. After code many examples, I realized that I was able to start to tracking just a part of the concept of this framework in the commit descriptions. So after that, I realized that all my building story was in the commits, written as a bullet list. And I understood this as a powerful technique because I was able to try to model this in my mind in this way, using these drawings to have the whole concept about how a technology works, how are the components, what are the concepts behind this. And after that, I was able to go more further in the commit messages, using the commit description as a concept in code. That was my first assumption to use this technique. And after that, I wanted to share and create a training for my colleagues to explain how Ember is working. So I create an exercise, I made some bullet points to follow and replicate, and I create a repository where you can find the same bullet list in the commit descriptions. If my colleagues wanted to check what was happening inside these commits, they just need to take the hash and make it show, and they will see the lines of code to achieve that point. And for me, this was really simple, but it was really powerful because this converts into a learning experience. You see, simple this. For me, empowering your instinctive skills is about this. It's about to be confused. It's about to find mentors. It's about understand that you are not alone, that you are a part of a team, that technology can paralyze you, that you can be honest and sincere with your team and with yourself to build your own autonomy, to build this safe place to prevent big mistakes. That's the things that I could learn using Git for my first time. But this is not all, because Git gives me this kind of superpower about to create my own hypotheses. And the important part about this was that Git becomes a tool to create these hypotheses about how a piece of software was developed. And this is really important to me because after that, probably I could feel that I was ready to face my next software project. And because Git gives me many ways to understand what was happening. But short spoiler, it's not enough, because software complexity, it's really, really, really complex, because it's not just about version control. It's about programming languages. It's about CI, CD, automation, unit testing, business rules. There are many other things that you have to keep in mind when you are coding software. But I learned that although Git is not enough to be your only tool, Git gives you your first step to start to understand this complexity. Because you are not alone, because software is built by people, because Git allows you to understand you as a part of this team. For me, I learned that using Git, you are able to become a better team player, because you can start to build your autonomy and your confidence through exploring a Git repository. And this will give you better questions to ask to your team. That's what I like Git, because Git enforces you to ask to your team, to ask for support, to recognize what things you are understanding and which things you can't understand. You are forced to face your hypothesis with the reality, with the project, with the people, with the clients. That's what I consider that Git is a valuable tool for me. So I remember that I was solving a code challenge for a recruiter. And after read the code challenge, I could solve this on my mind. And I decided to do something simple but complex, because I say, okay, I can solve this exercise, but I can write a description of the steps to try to put my building process, how I'm thinking this exercise and how I'm solving this in the code. And after that, I realized that this looks like the GitHub commit history. And I say, okay, what's happening if I write first my commit descriptions before code, and after that, I just write enough lines to achieve that description. And I remember that I was joking with the name, because for me it was in the same way that test-driven development. Code your test first, and after that, write your lines of code. And for me, it was like, oh my God, this is like a commit-driven development. Use Git to tell how you are building software. After that, I really like this technique, because it was really simple to have this clarity before code and to start to communicate how you are understanding software, how you are building your own understanding around a situation, and most important, how you are building these software features. For me, this was part of the log history for my code challenge for Airline Solution, my actual job. I wanted to share how I'm building software using this, and for me it was really valuable, because I found this way to communicate to each developers and to my managers how I was, my understanding and my vision, and I was able to face this part, because I think that one important thing here is being sincere with the things that you are doing and why you are doing this. For me, Git becomes a common point to converge and become a better team player, because you can find many of these techniques, not just for you, also for share with your colleagues. I think that all of these reasons are enough to become a better team player, and I discovered these thanks to Git. And probably in that moment, I really feel ready to face my next software project. I remember when I joined to Airline Solutions, I was in my first project, and I was really scared because I didn't understand nothing. I remember that it was my first project in English outside Mexico. And I remember one night I was really scared because I didn't understand nothing about my onboarding. And I was saying, okay, what can I do to understand this project? Because it's built in Elixir, I'm an Elixir developer, but I can understand this, what is happening inside this. And suddenly, I got an idea. What about to take one PR merge? What about to start to scratch in this PR, start to see the commits, start to see the description, and solve by myself? Because in this way, I will be able to code a solution for that feature, reading just the description, and after that, this is the important part, I will be able to have the code merge and my solution, and I will be able to compare how my team is working and how I'm understanding this project. And comparing these two features, I will be able to understand the things that I need to understand from this culture. That's really available, and that's really simple because it's just about read the commits, read the PRs merge, and that's all. This is really simple, but it's really powerful. It's simple technique, but this allows you to understand how your team is building software. But it's not everything, because also you can create your hypothesis how about a piece of software was developed by your team. And again, you need to face this with the reality. You need to ask questions. You need to ask for support. This is the way that I got better questions to ask to my team. I learned this to Git, and Git allows me to become a better team player thanks to this. And nowadays, I'm exploring another kind of techniques about how to verify my hypothesis. For example, I like to throw in my understanding in the PRs just for say to my team, hey, I don't have enough context about these business rules, but here is my understanding. Please tell me if I'm right or tell me if I'm in the wrong way, but please, I need to clarify this part. And of course, this is not the only way that I have to work in my team. This is just one part of that. Git allows me to understand all of these stages in my life, because for me, it's really important to be clear and sincere with this emotional stage of my life as a software developer. It's important to me talk about values. It's important to me talk about techniques. How you are building software is about you, it's about your autonomy, but also it's about your team. This is what I like Git to explain, how to empower your individual skills, but also how to empower this collaboration culture. But because all of these values are really important when you are part of the team and when you are building software. For me, probably Git is one of the primary tools that I consider as a catalyst, as an individual or as a team. And until now, this presentation was about my experiences learning Git. But let me share the next part. In this year, in February, I was invited to be a part of a program by Microsoft and the Mexican government to create a 3-month bootcamp. It was a full-stack bootcamp, and I was invited to build and design and give a 6-week training to learn backend practices using Node.js to many graduate students for any career in Mexico. So I'm not a big fan of the bootcamps to learn how to code and get a job. I feel that this was my opportunity to share all of these experiences to young developers, to my colleagues, to Mexican students. So let me share with you part of the results. When I was designing this bootcamp, Of course, I took all of these stages that I present and I mentioned before to create my own safe place, to experiment, to make mistakes, to learn. Because as a Mexican, I understood that our context is pretty different than other ones. And we need to take care of these values to create our safe place. And I draw this ajolote, his name is Wupa, to try to model this experience. I like this idea because I remember that Joseph Campbell, a famous anthropologist, after studying many cultures, he discovered that they are sharing a common mythm, the mythm about how a normal human becomes to a hero. And after that, I realized that he could model all of this story into many stages. People like George Lucas use this model to create movies like Star Wars, for example. And I was amazed because I say, okay, this looks pretty similar that the things that I'm doing here and I'm discovering using Git. So maybe if Joseph Campbell create the hero's journey, maybe I can try to model not the hero's journey in software. Maybe I could try to model the apprentice's journey. This was my assumption to create this. This was why it's important to realize this stage. And let me share the results of this. I have more than 1,000 of students in this bootcamp with me. We use Git and GitHub to mount and create static web pages. We created more than 800 of blog posts using Git, GitHub pages, GitHub Actions, and GoHugo. We shared some common repositories to code our activities. One of these repositories with the exercise have more than 800 of forks. We use Git since the first day. The participants must read code and download open source repositories. I like the idea about to create this safe place, to create our dummy example repositories, to encourage to my students to make forks, to open PRs, to solve issues, to create their own, their first contributions to software, to open source software. One of these repositories have more than 700 of pending PRs ready to my review. And I was really happy of all of these statics because this allowed me to understand that I was doing a great job with my students. I like the idea about to mentorship all of these students using Git behind scenes. All our coding sessions were about how you can use Git and combine, in that case, using Node.js. And we combine this with other techniques like test-driven development. We use Git to lose the fear, to download open source repositories and start to scratch the code, to do commit-driven development, and many more. And I know that my effort was worried with one of my students. One day, sent me some messages to share with me that he discovered a bug in an open source repository for use Trello using JavaScript. And he told me, hey, Carlo, I discovered this bug, and I was able to look in the commits, and I found what is happening, and I solved it, and I created my first PR. I was really excited about that because one of my students, he was from Morelia, one of the states in Mexico, was able to make his first open source contribution with this mentorship. I was really excited about that. For me, for all of this, Git is the tool that allows you to empower your instinctive skills and your collaboration culture. And just for finalize this presentation, I would like to say that for me, from my perspective, Git is not about this. It's not about how you can become the better developer. It's about this. It's about how you can be a better developer, how you can be a better human, how can you understand you as a part of the team, how can you create this empathy to you and to your colleagues? How can you build this confidence, and how can you build your own safe place, and how can you build this safe place to other ones? For me, Git is about all of this, and I like this idea to model this in this way because this is like my navigation chart. This allows me to understand me when I'm facing a new tool or a new technology. This allows me to understand in which stage I am when I have to deal with something new. Git is about us. That's the good part of this. So, if you want to empower your instinctive skills, I recommend you write your commits before code, build your narratives using Git as your learning diary, and read often your commits history to make sure what these have to say to you. If you are looking to empower your collaboration culture in your team, I recommend you 2 things. Work on build features that would be able to be built just looking the commits, and include rebuilding features done in your onboarding of new team members. I create the repository to share these presentations and to share these recommendations with more detail. I will share this in my social media accounts. And just for close this presentation, I talk about values, I talk about techniques, I talk about my experiences using and learning Git. And I don't want to close this presentation before to talk about what is important about to talk this. Because for me, as a Mexican, I have to deal with many challenges in my life. Not just I have to learn how to speak in English because that was the language gap is really big challenge for any Mexican. I have to deal with many other kind of things. I have to deal with emotional stage in my life. I have to deal, I have to face this part about to be paralyzed in front of technology, about to feel alone, and how important to me is today talk about values, talk about ethics behind technology, how you are using this as a developer, but also as a part of the team. For me, it's really important to make this clear because at the end of the day, software is built by people. We are people. This is part of my collaboration. This allows me to break with my culture in Mexico because our culture is a little bit different because we have fear to fail. And learning Git, I found that I have to lose this fear to create this safe place. And I learned that using tools like Git, I'm able to create a new collaboration for my colleagues. That's why it's important to talk about this. That's what I consider valuable. Be here today to share all of these experiences with all of you. This is all for me. And before to finish this part, I would like to thank to all my GitHub sponsors that are trusting my work. You can find me as Carlo Gilmar or Visual Partner. And thank you so much.